First, the account of newsman Fred J. Hewitt, who was already out on the street when the quake began. I was within a stone's throw of City Hall when the hand of an avenging god fell upon San Francisco. The ground rose and fell like an ocean at ebb tide. Then came the crash. Tons upon tons of that mighty pile, City Hall, slid away from the steel framework, and destructiveness of that effort was terrific. I had just reached Golden Gate Avenue and Larkin Street and had tarried a moment to converse with a couple of policemen. With me were 2 local newspapermen. We had just bid goodbye to the officers who proceeded down Larkin Street to the City Hall station. They had gotten midway down the block when the crash came. I saw those policemen enveloped in a shower of falling stone. Their lives must have been blotted out in an instant. What Fred had just witnessed was the foreshock. The main quake would follow just moments later. The street beds heaved in frightful fashion. The earth rocked, and then came the blow that wrecked San Francisco from the bay shore to the ocean beach, and from the Golden Gate to the end of the peninsula. As if in sympathy for its immediate neighbour, the old Supreme Court building danced a frivolous dance, and then tumbled into the street. Beneath that ruin of stone and brick were buried the 2 blue-coated guardians of the police to whom I had been talking a few minutes before. That few minutes, however, seemed to me a century. Down Golden Gate Avenue the houses commenced again their fantastic, ogreish dancing. One lone line of frame buildings tottered a moment, and then, just as a score or more of terror-stricken white-shirted humanity reached the open, it laid flat. The cries of those who must have perished reached my ears, and I hope that never again this side of the grave will I hear such signals of agony. I turned about from that point of view to shut out the terrible sight, but what went on all sides seemed to be just a repetition of what I had already witnessed. Looking up Golden Gate Avenue, I saw tons and tons of brick and stone on beam end, and then plunge into the street below. Then it was the idea flashed through my mind that God is merciful. What would have been the loss of life had the Almighty allowed the earthquake to occur in midday? Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson Chase, a ticket clerk, was on his way to work when the quake began. I had reached about halfway to Howard on the west side of First Street when I heard a low, distant rumble. It was coming from the west, louder and louder. I stopped and listened. Then it hit. Power and trolley lines snapped like threads. The ends of the power lines dropped to the pavement not 10 feet from where I stood, writhing and hissing like reptiles. Brick and glass showered about me. Buildings along First Street from Howard to Market crumbled like card houses. One was brick, not a soul escaped. Clouds of that obliterated the scene of destruction. The dust hung low over the rubble in the street. As this shock stopped, I crossed over to the east side of the street. By this time the power lines were dead. As soon as I reached the curb, a second shock hit. This was harder than the first. I was thrown flat, and the cobblestones danced like corn in a popper. More brick and glass showered down on the sidewalk. As on the west side of the street, these buildings were all 1 story. If I had been a block or 2 further down, on First Street, I would not be here today. While many were relieved just to have survived the quake, others were worried about what might come next. The first concern of Ernest Adams, a sales rep for Reed & Barton, makers of fine silverware, was the valuable stock that might be looted from his place of work. Reaching the office, I waded through plaster, etc. to find the goods still in the cases, but off the shelves, without any damage being done to them. Locking the doors again, I rushed to the street to find the city 2 blocks away in flames, and the fire department helpless, as all of the water mains had been ruptured and destroyed. I gathered up a force of 7 men, stationed them at our office doors, and started for a truck. After hunting an hour, I secured a truck at $50 a load, and again started for the office. Fortunately, I had 2 guns in the office, and stationing 1 man at the entrance and 1 on the truck with orders to shoot, the balance of us went to work, and that dray man pulled the heaviest load of his life. I saved all of the sterling hollow and flatware with the exception of a few flatware samples in the trays beside my books. The plated ware it was impossible to touch, as the flames were then upon us, and another truck, at $1,000 a load, was an impossibility. By this time the streets were a pandemonium, and locking the office doors we mounted our guarded load and started for the country out toward the Cliff House. My house being in ruins, I knew not where I would land, but I kept the teamster going with a gun at his back until we were 3 miles out of town. Meeting a friend, I placed the goods in the parlour of his little cottage that had not been damaged much, and I thought was safe. Then I hiked for home to see how the wife was. I found her sitting beside the ruins of what was once her home, but she is a brick, and never showed the white feather once or since. While Ernest secured his silverware, Dr. George Bloomer made his way into work to deal with the expected casualties. I started to walk to the Central Emergency Hospital in the City Hall, for I felt that I might be of some assistance to the head physician, Dr. Hassler, whom I knew. On my way to City Hall, I met a friend, Arthur Smith, who suggested that we go for a few minutes to the office building where he worked, a skyscraper on the south side of Market Street, so we could take the elevator to the roof and look around. As the building was on the way to Central Emergency Hospital, I agreed, and from the roof we counted no less than 7 small fires, most of them south of Market Street in the poorer section of the city. After a few minutes I left for the City Hall, a politically built structure, and found that it had been so badly damaged by the quake that the emergency hospital had been moved to the Mechanics' Pavilion, a large wooden structure ordinarily used for exhibitions and prize fights. In the Mechanics' Pavilion, lying on long rows of mattresses on the floor, were perhaps about 200 patients, most of whom had head injuries or broken bones, probably due to bricks falling from chimneys. I learned that most of them came from south of Market, which, in addition to being a poor part of town with inferior buildings, was, in its lower part, on made ground, of which there was an area extending from the bay at the Ferry Building up Market Street about to Montgomery Street, and spreading to some extent laterally. The combination of made ground and poor construction was undoubtedly the cause of so many collapsed chimneys in this section. I had been at work only about 10 minutes when I heard someone yell, "The roof is on fire!" Somehow, a policeman got up on the crossbeams below the rafters from inside of the building and managed to put the fire out. It was only 10 or 15 minutes before a new fire started in another part of the roof. Dr. Hassler wisely decided that the patients must be evacuated promptly, and this was done by calling in volunteers from the street and commandeering passing automobiles. 3 men would get on each side of a patient, 2 at each end and 2 at the middle, and push their arms under the mattress, clasp hands, and carry out the patient, who was deposited in an automobile. We managed to get all the living patients safely out before the fire got too hot, but about 20 dead in one corner of the building could not be removed, and were cremated. The fires, by this time, were becoming an increasing danger. General Frederick Funston found himself supervising the fighting of fires throughout the wrecked city. It is useless to attempt to go into a detailed account of the events of that night of horrors. 4 square miles of the city were on fire. The night was as light as day, and the roar of the conflagration, the crash of falling walls, and the continuous explosions made a pandemonium simply indescribable. During the night, the Grant Building, headquarters of the Pacific Division, and the Phelan Building, for so many years headquarters of the Department of California, had gone up in the general holocaust, and the officers on duty in the city assembled and re-established headquarters at Fort Mason, the small and ancient army post on the bay shore, at the north end of Van Ness Avenue. Block by block and street by street and hour after hour, the firemen, police and soldiers fought the conflagration in hope of possible success. Scores of buildings were blown down by dynamite and gun cotton, and others were set on fire in order to check the conflagration by backfiring. The Pacific Squadron, under command of Admiral Goodrich, arrived from the south and landed several hundred Marines and bluejackets, who rendered excellent service in fighting the fire and patrolling the streets. During the memorable 18th and 19th, every hotel and bank, every large store, and nearly every storeroom and wareroom in the city had been destroyed. 300,000 people were homeless, and thousands more were left without the means of livelihood. One of those left without shelter was Emma M. Burke, whose apartment was damaged in the quake and who thus took shelter in a refugee camp in a park. As we returned to camp, we encountered one of the long lines waiting for their turns to draw rations. A young mother turned away with her well-filled basket, wheeling her baby before her. "I want to go home, Mama. I want to go home," pleaded the little one as she passed into the darkening aisles of the park. "We haven't any home, dear. Lie down and let Mama cover you up," she replied, in the softest and most comforting of tones. As, showing how lightly we slept and what apprehension from the fire stayed with us in our dreams, in the small hours of that night a horseman dashed about the park shouting, "The fire is under control!" and handclaps and hurrahs came from out the dark copses and lawns, and joy flowed like a wave over the great concourse hidden in the shrubbery. It rained a little the fourth night, and as the weather continued threatening and we had no tent, we returned to our desolated flat. In the night it poured. The fallen chimneys had torn through the ceilings into two of our rooms. The flat tin roof had thus been bent down and now acted as a funnel. We heard an ominous drip, drip, and then a steady splash. We dared not light a candle. It was against military orders. So we groped along, hand in hand, through the fallen furniture, pictures and bundles, and found the water beating a merry tattoo on my sewing machine, velvet carpet, and some overturned books. We scrambled them out of the way and hurried to the kitchen. Streams were falling on my gas and coal stoves. We placed pans, but they filled faster than we could empty them. In the darkness, we were getting drenched ourselves, so in despair we shut the door and went to bed. On account of our inability to cope with the flood that poured in on us, the 3 flats below us were very much damaged by water, as they were locked up and their owners away. The next day, we learned that my husband's law library was burned. Did we feel regret? No, we simply did not have time. The bugle calls in the morning, the pacing sentries and galloping officers told of our military occupation. 2 shots which I heard ended human lives. Both were cases of looting. Men who met that fate were frequently left to lie where they fell, and a sign of looter put over them. One pertinent feature of this awful experience of earthquake and fire is the entire change of opinion in regard to the automobile. Its most virulent critics now sound its praise. The railroad and streetcar service was destroyed at one blow, and we suddenly appreciated that San Francisco was truly a city of magnificent distances. The autos alone remain to conquer space. They sped the wounded to the hospitals, carried the dead to the morgues, flashed past with doctors and nurses, city officials and army officers. One chauffeur I knew ran his auto for 48 hours without rest, resuming after a brief nap to carry dynamite to blow down threatening walls. Yesterday we rode in an old vegetable wagon down through the devastated city to the ferry building. Familiar places could be located only by the few towering steel structures rising gaunt and bare over heaps of brick and stone, tangled wires, warped metal girders, and remnants of tottering walls. Verily the abomination of desolation, and 4 square miles of it, the great pulsing commercial heart of the town, in ashes.
nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up.